right, good afternoon, everybody. Yesterday, remember, we spoke about electrolyte physiology and EKG physiology yesterday. But today, we're going to continue with cardiophysiology and pathology. We're going to explain murmurs. And we're going to understand murmurs without memorization. Because you cannot memorize murmurs and to go to the exam, to the USMLE exam. Because murmurs, you should understand murmurs, like systolic murmur, diastolic murmur, and opening snap, hollow systolic murmur, open systolic murmur. Those things, you should understand them in order for you to do well in your USMLE exam. I'm going to draw the heart, and I will ask you to repeat after me, because the way you can understand better, your participation is important. Okay? Great. I'm going to draw the heart. And how many heart do you have?
One.
How many heart?
One.
One. How many heart?
One.
One heart. One heart. Like a very nice heart. And we have one heart and two sides. How many sides?
Two sides.
Okay, repeat after me. What side?
Two sides.
What side? Repeat after me. What side? And left side.
Left side.
What side?
Right side.
Left side.
Okay.
What side?
Right side.
Left side.
Left side.
Say it again. What side?
Side.
Left side.
Left side.
What side?
Right
Left
side.
side.
Left side.
What side?
Right side.
Left side.
Left side.
Yes, it's important. Why I'm doing that is because it's important to distinguish what side of the heart and left side of the heart. Is very important, and you will see why. Okay, we have two sides. We have two sides. We have the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. Okay, how many sides? Two sides, right side, and left side. And they are kind of different, and they have different pathology. It's very important to know we have right side of the heart and left side of the heart. All right, and we have 4 chambers. How many chambers?
4.
How many chambers?
4.
4 chambers. We have the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Repeat after me. Right atrium,
Right atrium.
right ventricle,
Right ventricle.
left atrium,
Left atrium.
left ventricle.
Left ventricle.
It seems like it's simple, but it's not. It's very important. And to know we have 4 chambers, right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. It's very important to know that. Because in the exam, you will not gonna think about anything. You know your concept, and you know you are not memorizing, and you're just gonna click and move, okay? Now, listen to that. All of the blood in your body will go to the heart. All of the blood in your body will go to the heart. But the way the blood will go to the heart, the blood will go from inferior vena cava. Let me draw it like this. We go from inferior vena cava. We'll take blood from your lower extremity into the heart and superior vena cava. Superior vena cava will take blood on top, on your head, and go to the heart. Okay? Both inferior vena cava and superior vena cava will put blood to the right atrium from your body, all over your body. All of the blood in your body will go to the heart through the right atrium. Okay, right atrium. Now, from the right atrium, the blood will keep going to the right ventricle. But we have a valve called tricuspid valve. Everybody said tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve is the valve that is in the right side of the heart. It's between the right atrium and the right ventricle. I put T for short, tricuspid valve. Everybody said tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve is in the right side. Everybody said right side. Tricuspid valve is the right side of the heart. Is between the right atrium and right ventricle. Now, the blood coming from like right atrium, go to the right ventricle, the tracheal valve will open, and the blood will keep going from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. If I said pulmonary artery, pulmonary artery. But we have another valve here, we call that pulmonary valve. If I said pulmonary valve, pulmonary valve is the valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. It's the valve between right ventricle and pulmonary artery. Now, the blood keep going from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. From the pulmonary artery, the blood will go to the lungs. From the pulmonary artery, the blood will go where? To the lungs. To the lungs. The blood will go to the lungs. Like the lung is here, like in the back, but I will put it on top here because I want everybody to see that. Yes, okay? This is the lungs. And the blood from the pulmonary artery will go to the lungs, and from the lungs, the blood will go to the left atrium. From the lungs, the blood will go to the left atrium. Repeat after me. From the lungs, the blood will go to the left atrium. Great, great. Now, from the left atrium, the blood will go to the left ventricle. But we have a valve here on the left side, between the left atrium and the left ventricle. We call that mitral valve. Repeat after me. Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
I put a M for mitral. Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve.
Mitral valve is in the left side of the heart and is between the left atrium and the left ventricle. Now the blood will keep going from the left atrium to the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle, the blood will go to the aorta. Okay, I put aorta here. And between left ventricle to the aorta, we have aortic valve. Everybody said aortic valve. Aortic valve. Aortic valve.
Aortic valve.
Aortic valve is between the left ventricle to the aorta. Everybody is clear?
Yes.
Okay, this is the normal circulation. Because you have to understand the normal first before understand the abnormal. This is normal physiology of the circulation. Now, from the left ventricle, the aortic valve will open and the blood will go to the aorta. Everybody is clear?
Yes.
Easy, huh?
Yep.
Very easy. Everything will be like this. Very easy. Here in Love Tutoring Academy. We don't believe in memorization. We believe in understanding. All right. Now, we're going to talk about cardiac cycle. We're going to talk about systole and diastole. Because to understand murmur, like systolic murmur, like diastolic murmur, you have to understand what is systole and what is diastole. Everybody is clear?
Yes.
Great, great. Now, listen to this. We said very clear that we don't talk about systole and we don't talk about diastole. Everybody says systole. Systole. Diastole. Diastole. Yes. You cannot go to the exam and not knowing what is systole, what is diastole. How you can understand any murmur if you don't understand what is systole, what is diastole. But from now on, you will understand very well what is systole and what is diastole. Okay, what is happening first of all during systole? During systole, mitral valve is closed, aortic valve is open, and the blood comes from the left ventricle to the aorta. We call that systole. I will repeat again. Systole is the ejection of the left ventricle, the blood in the left ventricle, to the aorta. For that, mitral valve should be closed and aortic valve should be open. Again, I will repeat it again. Systole, to have systole, mitral valve supposed to close, aortic valve supposed to open, and you will have ejection, left ventricle to the aorta. You have systole. Okay? The same thing will happen to the right side. Systole on the right side, tricuspid valve closed, pulmonary valve open, and the blood will go from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. We call that systole. Okay? Now, repeat after me. Systole.
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 Mitral valve closed.
Mitral valve closed.
Aortic valve open.
Aortic valve open.
Ejection of the left ventricle.
Ejection of left ventricle.
Ejection of the left ventricle.
Ejection of the left ventricle.
And this is systole. You got it. This is systole. Okay? And we have diastole. Diastole, you can say with confidence, diastole means feeling. What diastole mean? Feeling. Okay, we'll see that. It's feeling of the ventricles. Okay, let's go to the left side. We said this is the left side, and this is the right side. Okay, diastole is when aortic valve is closed, mitral valve is open, and the blood comes from the left atrium to the left ventricle. The blood fills the left ventricle. We call that diastole. I repeat it again. Diastole is when aortic valve closed, mitral valve open, and the blood comes from the aorta to the left ventricle. We call that diastole. Okay, let's go to the other side. Let's go to the right side. Okay, we said we have diastole. Diastole means feeling. What does diastole mean?
Feeling.
Diastole mean feeling. Okay, let's see that. We have diastole on the right side is when pulmonary valve closed, tricuspid valve open, and the blood comes from the right atrium to the right ventricle. We call that diastole. Okay, it's the feeling of the right side. Okay, everybody is clear? Yes. Okay, repeat after me. Diastole. Diastole on the right side.
On the right side.
Tricuspid valve open.
Tricuspid valve open.
Pulmonary valve closed.
Pulmonary closed.
The blood comes from the right atrium
The blood from the right atrium
to the right ventricle.
to the right ventricle.
We call that diastole. That's it. Now you know for a fact what is systole and what is diastole. All right. Everybody is clear?
Yes.
Samantha, are you clear?
Yes.
Andrea, do you have any questions?
No.
What about Bob? You have a question?
No.
All right. Everybody is clear?
Yes.
Okay, let's keep going then. Now, you will see the murmurs now. You will see the murmurs. Okay, we said, Samantha, you said that, and you're right, that you said during systole, mitral valve is closed, aortic valve is open, and the blood is from the left ventricle to the aorta. You said that was systole, and you were right. That was systole. Now, what happened, are you with me, Andrea? What happened if during systole, aortic valve is not opening, say I don't want to be open, and mitral valve supposed to close is not closing. What? During systole, aortic valve supposed to be open, mitral valve supposed to be closed. They say, no, I don't want to be open, aortic valve. Mitral valve said, I don't want to be closed. Let me tell you, Samantha, every time during systole, aortic valve is not opening, you have a systolic murmur. Andrea, you have a systolic murmur also, every time during systole, mitral valve is not closing. We have a systolic murmur. Exactly. That means you have systolic murmur when during systole, aortic valve is not opening, mitral valve is not closing. We have a systolic murmur. That's it. That's it. Where you go, Samantha, they ask you, what is systolic murmur? Oh, systolic murmur in the left side, either during systole, aortic valve should be open, is not opening, mitral valve should be closed, is not closing. This is systole. Wherever you go, you say the same thing. If you go to USMLE exam, you say the same thing. This is systole. Systolic murmur. This is systolic murmur. I repeat it again. You have systolic murmur is when during systole, aortic valve supposed to be open is not opening, mitral valve supposed to be closed is not closing. You have a systolic murmur. Now, my question for you is, why is that? What could cause aortic valve to open during systole is not opening? Oh, easy. One of them, aortic stenosis. A stenosis means like something like closed, it's locked, it's very closed, and he doesn't want to open. We call that stenosis. That means if I ask you aortic stenosis is a systolic murmur or diastolic murmur, you're going to answer systolic murmur. Great, correct, systolic murmur, because during systole is not opening. We have aortic stenosis. That means you are not going to memorize aortic stenosis as a systolic murmur. You said, oh no, it's just a systolic murmur. If I ask you in your exam, why? Oh, why is a systolic murmur? Because during systole, aortic valve is supposed to be open, is not opening, is closed. It's a stenotic valve. This is systolic murmur. Or you have systolic murmur is when mitral valve should be supposed to be closed, is not closing during systole. You have a systolic murmur. That means you could have a systolic murmur with aortic stenosis or with mitral valve stay open during systole. We give a name of that. We call that regurgitation. Thank you, Andrea. We call that regurgitation. That means you have systolic murmur when you have aortic stenosis or mitral regurgitation. That is systolic murmur. That means if I ask you what kind of murmur is aortic stenosis, you're going to answer me systolic murmur. Correct. If I ask you mitral regurgitation, what kind of murmur, you're going to answer systolic murmur. Both are systolic murmur. Both are systolic murmur because during systole, they are not doing what they are supposed to do. This is happening also in the other side.
The right side.
Exactly. That means, Samantha, if you have pulmonary stenosis, it's a systolic murmur or diastolic murmur? Systolic murmur. If you have tricuspid regurgitation, is a systolic murmur or diastolic murmur? Systolic murmur. Exactly. That means you have one systolic murmur, other systolic murmur, other systolic murmur, other systolic murmur. We just have like 4 systolic murmur. Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Andrea. This is beautiful. Yeah, and easy, huh? And easy. Now, you get your systolic murmur. When you see pulmonary stenosis, you're going to say systolic murmur. If you see aortic stenosis, you're going to say? If you see mitral regurg, what are you going to say? By the way, if you see tricuspid regurg, what are you going to say? Systolic murmur. Great. Now, Samantha, I have something to ask you. You said aortic stenosis is a systolic murmur. And mitral regurg is a systolic murmur. Both are in the left side. Now, if they tell you the patient has a systolic murmur in the left side, how are you going to know if they are talking about aortic stenosis or mitral regurg? Because both are systolic murmurs. Yes, but they will give you a clue. They will give you the sound, abnormal sound. Because the murmur, they are systolic murmur, okay? They have this murmur, but the sound will be different. That means if they want you to answer mitral regurg, they will give you a clue for that. If they want you to answer aortic stenosis, they will give you a clue for that, because both are systolic murmur. Remember, we said from the beginning, ejection is when left ventricle, the blood in the left ventricle go to the aorta. We call that ejection. But if you have aortic stenosis, the ejection will not be smooth for you, will not be normal. You will hear an abnormal sound during the ejection of the left ventricle. These sounds will be click. That means, Samantha, every time they tell you ejection click, they are talking about aortic stenosis. That means if they tell you the patient has like murmur, systolic murmur in the left side with ejection click, they are talking about what?
Aortic stenosis.
Say it again.
Aortic stenosis.
Say it again.
Aortic stenosis.
Aortic stenosis. Yes. This is what we are teaching in Love Tutoring Academy. You can find out things on your own without like memorizing things. Okay, now for mitral regurg is a systolic murmur also, but the sound of this systolic murmur will be different than ejection click, because we don't have ejection in mitral valve. If it's regurg, it's like open. That means during systole, mitral valve is supposed to be closed, is open if you have systolic murmur. And during systole, normally aortic valve is open. That means when you have mitral regurg, the left side is open. Yes, mitral valve is open because of regurgitation, and aortic valve is open because it's systole. That means you have systole all the way through. We call that hollow systolic murmur. That means mitral regurg is hollow systolic murmur. Hollow mean like pain, mean like everybody, like everything, like systolic all the way, like hollow mean whole. That means the whole side, of the whole left side, we have systole. That means every time you have mitral regurg, we call that hollow systolic murmur. Hollow systolic murmur. That means if they tell you the patient has a systolic murmur in the left side and they hear hollow systolic murmur, what they are talking about?
Mitral valve regurgitation.
Mitral valve regurgitation. If they tell you the patient has systolic murmur in the left side and they hear a hollow systolic murmur, what they are talking about, class?
Mitral regurgitation.
Mitral regurgitation. That means hollow systolic murmur is for mitral regurgitation. Exactly. If they tell you they hear ejection click in the left side, the diagnosis will aortic stenosis. You got it. You got it. That is happening in the right side also. That means if you have tricuspid regurgitation, you're gonna hear a hollow systolic murmur. That means if you have pulmonary stenosis, you're gonna hear ejection click. Exactly. They are systolic murmur.
Okay.
That means, Samantha, mitral regurg, what kind of murmur? Hollow systolic murmur. Tricuspid regurg, what kind of murmur? Hollow systolic murmur. Really? Hollow systolic murmur, hollow systolic murmur. Let's repeat it again. Tricuspid regurg. What kind of murmur?
Holosystolic murmur.
Mitral regurg. What kind of murmur? Holosystolic murmur. Louder, louder. I want that louder, to be really loud in your mind. And when you go to the exam, to have holosystolic murmur all over your brain, all over your mind. If I ask you, what kind of murmur is tricuspid regurgitation? Your answer will be holosystolic murmur, correct. If I ask you what kind of murmur with mitral regurgitation, your answer will be holosystolic murmur. What? Holosystolic murmur in the left side and holosystolic murmur on the right side? Both are holosystolic murmur. But how you can differentiate them? Because if they tell you the patient has a holosystolic murmur, now you know they are talking about either mitral regurgitation or tricuspid regurgitation. But how are you going to find out? They will give you a clue for that. They will give you a clue. Because we have the right side, we have tricuspid on the right side, and the left side, you have mitral on the left side. That means the clue they will give you, they will tell you one of these things. They may tell you the patient has holosystolic murmur when the patient inhales or when the patient takes a breath. When the patient inhales, is the right side. The right side, if you have a problem in the right side, the problem will be accentuated. You will hear the murmur louder. That means if they tell you the patient has holosystolic murmur, the patient has holosystolic murmur, and the murmur is louder with inspiration, they are talking about right side. They are talking about tricuspid regurg. If they tell you with expiration, the murmur is louder, the holosystolic murmur is louder, they are talking about the left side. If they are talking about the left side, they are talking about mitral regurgitation. Exactly. The same thing for pulmonary artery, pulmonary stenosis, the same thing for aortic stenosis. They are systolic murmur, but in different sides. But this side, the patient will hear the murmur louder with inspiration. In the left side, the doctor will hear the murmur louder with expiration. Do you understand that? Do you have any questions so far? Okay, repeat after me. Left side, expiration. Left side, expiration. Right side, inspiration. Right side, inspiration. Great. Great. Now, we're pretty much done with systolic murmur. Now, we have aortic stenosis. It's a systolic murmur. You're going to hear ejection click. And we have mitral regurg or mitral regurgitation, systolic murmur. You're going to hear holosystolic murmur. And the same thing in the right side, pulmonary stenosis. You're going to hear ejection click as a systolic murmur. And tricuspid regurgitation, you're going to hear holosystolic murmur as a systolic murmur. Everybody is clear? Yes. Everybody is very clear? Yes. Great. It's like easy. No memorizing, remember, understanding. Okay. Now, we have, if they tell you holosystolic murmur, now we know for a fact we're going to look for tricuspid regurg or mitral regurg. That makes things easier for you when you know the thing. We have only these two holosystolic murmur. We have a third systolic murmur, holosystolic murmur. We're going to talk about that later on. But for now, the two most important holosystolic murmur, you know it. Repeat after me. Tricuspid regurg and mitral regurg. Holosystolic murmur. holosystolic murmur is also pansystolic murmur. Same thing. If you don't want to say holosystolic murmur, you can say pansystolic murmur. Now, let's go to diastolic murmur. Do you have any questions about systolic murmur? No question about systolic murmur?
Nope.
Oh, why? Clear? Great. Now, let's continue with diastolic murmur. We said from the beginning, we have diastole is when it's a feeling. Great, Samantha. You see? That's like kicking right away. Right away. Yes, it's easy. And everything is like this. Easy. You have to take it easy. Because in the exam, no, like stress for the exam. No more. The USMLE exam you should have fun. You should have fun taking your exam. All right. We said, like said Samantha, diastolic is feeling. Okay, feeling of ventricles. Okay, let's do the left side. Okay, let's do the left side. Okay. Diastole, we said that the normal diastole is when aortic valve is closed, mitral valve is open, and the blood from the left atrium to the left ventricle. Okay, we have diastole. Now we have diastolic murmur if this is not opening like that, the way we just said that. If it's not opening like that, we have diastolic murmur. Just simple as that. Simple as that. If during diastole, aortic valve supposed to be closed, is not closing, we have a diastolic murmur. Or mitral valve supposed to be open, is not opening, we have a diastolic murmur. Now, if I ask you, in what condition aortic valve supposed to close during diastole is not closing, your answer will be aortic regurgitation. Because regurgitation is insufficiency. That means the valve stay open. If I ask you, what could cause mitral valve to not open during diastole, your answer will be, exactly, Samantha, mitral stenosis. That means, señores y señoras, that means every time you have aortic regurg, mitral stenosis, what kind of murmur you have? Diastolic murmur. Every time you have pulmonary regurgitation, tricuspid stenosis, what kind of murmur you have? Diastolic murmur. Thank you, Andrea. We have diastolic murmur. You got it? Cool. Let's keep going then. We said, and you are right, aortic regurg is a diastolic murmur. Mitral stenosis is a diastolic murmur. Why is there diastolic murmur, mitral stenosis? Because during diastole, mitral valve is supposed to be open. It's not opening because of the stenosis. We call that diastolic murmur. Now, Samantha, my question for you, how you differentiate mitral stenosis versus aortic regurg? Because both are diastolic murmur on the left side. If they tell you, Andrea, oh yeah, the doctor went to the emergency department and the patient has a murmur, and the doctor was listening to the murmur, and the doctor heard diastolic murmur in the left side, or diastolic murmur when the patient exhaled, when the patient breathed out. That means you know the patient has either mitral stenosis or aortic regurg, because the doctor said diastolic murmur in the left side. Now, how you differentiate them? Because both are diastolic murmur. The sound they will make will differentiate them, and they will give you this clue. That means for mitral stenosis, because the blood should go from the left atrium to the aorta, the blood trying to go, trying to go, and the valve, like it's stenotic valve, the blood cannot go, but the blood should go anyway because the patient will die. And left atrium, like trying so hard to push the blood to the left ventricle, And finally, the left ventricle will pop open. We call that opening snap. Opening snap. That means the sounds mitral stenosis makes, we call that opening snap. When I say opening snap, you say mitral stenosis. When I say mitral stenosis, you say opening snap. Opening snap. Okay. That means if they tell you the patient has diastolic murmur in the left side with opening snap, the diagnosis is mitral stenosis. Thank you very much. And the sounds for aortic regurg also is different. For aortic regurg, we will hear a decrescendo murmur. What murmur you will hear for aortic regurg? Decrescendo murmur. Decrescendo murmur. That means they will tell you in the vignette, the patient has a diastolic murmur in the left side, but the murmur sounds like decrescendo murmur. And we know because if the left side, the diagnosis will be aortic exactly. You got it, aortic regurgitation. That will happen in the other side also. If you tell you the patient has opening snap in the left side, what is the diagnosis? Tricuspid stenosis. Tricuspid stenosis. Or the patient has, this is the right side, huh? And the patient has decrescendo murmur in the right side, the diagnosis will be?
Pulmonary regurgitation.
Pulmonary regurgitation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, we just covered the most important murmurs. We have some other murmurs to cover, but we're going to take a break. After the break, we're going to cover the other murmurs. Also, we're going to cover cardiac pathology.